Let's get cracking. That's it. Today's the day. The Seattle Kraken are becoming an official NHL team. And for those who are thinking that this is going to be a Milwaukee Bucks celebration, you're wrong. I don't care about the NBA. Congrats to the Bucks. I almost said Buccaneers here. But I have a special show, and I don't care what any of you think who are listening. Tonight's the expansion draft. ESPN, I was so excited for you to advertise this, and you just haven't. However, I know I'm not the only one excited about this. I've got host of the Hockeyholic, who's usually on after me on Tuesdays, and he's on Thursdays as well. James Leather here with me. He's a big hockey guy and a Devils fan. And James, how's it going? Welcome to Not That It Matters, and welcome to this special expansion draft.
I know, yeah, it's a great night. Excited to be on this show. First time guest for Not That It Matters. Hosted, great show here. Love listening to it right before I go on.
Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, of course. It's an exciting week for hockey. Really, we have the protection list just came out the other day. The expansion draft is tonight. We are getting officially the 32nd team in the NHL. Kind of later this week, we also have the NHL entry draft too. So it's a huge week for hockey, but super excited to be talking about the Seattle expansion franchise, which is drafting tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern time.
Eastern time. Western for us guys.
There we go. But yeah, so we can watch that on ESPN2, I believe, in the States, and Sportsnet in Canada. But it should be a fun time. The picks are in mostly. I mean, Seattle has they've given the league their list, and a lot of picks have been leaked out to certain media sources,
which kind of stinks, if I'm being honest with you. It ruins the fun. Now, I will say this: there were 10 trades back in 2017 with the Las Vegas Golden Knights. Sorry, the Vegas Golden Knights, not the Las Vegas Golden Knights. I got to get it right here. I am a hockey fan after all. But they said there will be no trades announced until tonight's show. So at least there's going to be some buzz. We don't know if Chicago's pick, and we don't know if somebody else's pick. I forget who it is. I think it's I forget who it is. I have it pulled up here in a second. But it's gonna be a fun night. We don't have Chicago and we don't have Detroit. The Rangers did come out after Cap Friendly did come out and say that they didn't have those picks in. However, James and I have done some preliminary research. We've done our picks for our own Seattle team. Cap Friendly is a great resource to look at contracts, cap space, who's signing who, free agents, buyouts, what contracts are going to look like, clauses on contracts. And they created an interactive thing for you to go pick by pick after the protection list for each team came out, for you to pick a team with the guidelines of how many forwards, defensemen, goalies, and the cap space where you need to be the minimum and maximum for you to be a part of in order to create your own version of Seattle. And that's exactly what he and I have done, either whether that was last night or this morning. So for you guys here, we're going to go team by team. And if there's a pick out for that team, we will analyze our pick and why we think that would have been a good pick, or if it is a good pick, if it is the same. So, James, we're going to jump right into it here.
Let's do it.
First on the list, the Anaheim Ducks. Now, this one, you don't hear, I mean, you think, oh, we heard before, Adam Henrique is a 31-year-old. He's still got 3 years left on his contract, making 5.8. So 31 years old, center. He's a veteran, but he's making a lot of money. I did not go with him. I actually went with Hayden Fleury, and before I reveal who it is, he's a 25-year-old defenseman with 1 year left on his contract of $1.3 million, and he has a restricted free agent, meaning they can they have personal rights to him for after next season. And who did you have for the Anaheim Ducks going to Seattle today?
I actually had the same pick there. I had Hayden Fleury as well. Adam Henrique was my backup pick. I figured. I mean, I'm a Devils fan. I love Rico. I think he's great. He's slightly overpaid at this point. You'd have to think his production hasn't really been the same since he's gone over to Anaheim. But then again, Anaheim was kind of secretly the second worst team in the league this season. I feel like that went by very quietly. Like no one really talked about that. That being said, I like Rico, and his cap hit kind of makes it interesting. If I'm Seattle, I'm thinking there's a lot of other players here. Like we have to keep within. They have to reach the cap floor, but they can't go over the cap like a certain team did in the playoffs. Shout out to the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Whoa.
With that being said, though, I did like Hayden Fleury.
We're going to have to hold on. We're going to talk about this here. I'm going to say this real quick. They went over the cap. So did Carolina. So did Vegas. So did all these other teams. And here's one thing before I let you continue with your Hayden Fleury analysis. The only team to vote to keep a salary cap in the playoffs was the Tampa Bay Lightning. That's all I'll say on that.
I did see that. And you know what? I'm looking at my Tampa Bay jersey right to the left of me right now. I was fine with them being 18 million over the cap. I didn't care.
Made it fun.
There you go. Exactly. It was a great team to watch. It was fantastic. But
Continue with your
moving
Hayden
on,
Fleury. Yes.
yeah, Hayden Fleury.
And
He's a young D man.
is he left-handed, right-handed? Let
He's
me take a
got
look here. Go ahead, continue. I'm gonna do some research. My
yeah,
bad.
he's yeah, no problem. But yeah, like Max was saying earlier before, he's at a low cap hit. He's at 1.3 million. He is an RFA after next season, going into the 2022-2023 off season. Team control is a big thing, especially if you're a new franchise. And a lot of these players that Seattle's picking, a lot of them are either UFAs or RFAs this offseason or next offseason. Like, it's important to have some team control over these players that you're selecting for the first time.
Especially the
Because let's
young
say
guys.
if Seattle's not good, exactly. If Seattle's not good, and let's say some young guys have a decent season and they want more money, they could like go elsewhere. Like, Seattle needs just to have team control over some of these players, or else, you'll have a good team, a decent team if some of these players play well, but you might not have the money to sign all of them back. So you're just losing all your players that you just picked the year prior.
Right, exactly. And so Hayden Fleury is a left-handed defenseman. He's listed as a lefty and right D. I mean, his cap hit's 1.3. He's 25 years old. His birthday was 2 weeks ago, July 8th, actually. He's
Happy
got some
birthday.
good size to him, 6'3", 208, and originally from Carolina. And then he was moved to traded to the Ducks this past year, played 12 games with them, 2 goals, 1 assist. So not a crazy offensive guy, but it's a good young guy to kind of hold and kind of keep a part of. So and I will say this, he was the pick. He is the pick for those. The insiders have ruined it. He was the pick for the Seattle Kraken today. And I think that's a good, he's going to be a good middle defenseman guy. I think he's going to be solid. He's 25, still got room to grow. And he will be the first name called tonight when it does come down to the actual time. Now, let's move on here to Arizona. Now, Arizona, prior to the deadline of the roster freeze of and then the 2 hours after the roster freeze, they needed to submit the protection list. They made a trade with the San Jose Sharks. I talked about this yesterday with co-host Derek. The Sharks had traded Yusuf Kojanaj, a goaltender who's 23 years old, to Arizona, and a second-round pick for goaltender Aiden Hill, who's 24 years old, and a fourth-round pick. Now, as a person who watched the Sharks closely, who's been going to games for years and follows, the Sharks as a team of like one of their own, I think this is a good trade for the Sharks, and it showed because the Sharks ended up keeping Aiden Hill over their goaltender who brought to the Stanley Cup Finals, who is falling off a cliff, in Martin Jones. Now, I want to know who you picked in Arizona, and then I think this is one of the ones where we're going to have something different, and we're not going to be sure who was picked, because I was torn between 2 guys here.
Yeah, Arizona, I was slightly torn about it. There's a few ways that I could have gone about it. I figured, though, with my Arizona pick, I went with Christian Fischer. He's 1 year left. He's an RFA in the 2022 season. He's a decent young forward. I mean, like I said, with the Anaheim effect earlier, talking about Adam Henrique, Arizona's not exactly, this thriving offensive team. Christian Fischer's, he's got some potential. I know he was a big name coming up for Arizona back in the past few years. You've been hearing about him. And, he was left unprotected. So, I mean, that kind of says something about Arizona. Now, that might not be saying anything about the player, but that might be more saying, hey, we're in a position where we may not be able to pay Christian Fischer. I know there's rumors going around with Arizona that, Jacob Chikrin, he's like untouchable for them, but he's going to want big money. There's another Ford out there whose name is escaping me right now in Arizona, but he's Christian Dvorak too. He's like on
So you're thinking about Clayton Keller?
No, Clayton Keller. There's another one. His name probably starts with a C as well, but
I'll take a look.
Yeah, take a look on that. I'll keep talking. But yeah, I think Christian Fischer could be a nice young bottom 6. Maybe he can fill in on a second line every now and then, but he's still relatively young. He's got once again team control, as I was talking about with Hayden Fleury. But I think Christian Fischer could be a decent pick for Arizona.
Was the player Christian Dvorak?
Christian Dvorak, I believe, was
and then they've also got to pay Connor Garland. He's a restricted free agent.
Connor Garland, yep, that's it right there.
So in Arizona, they took on that cap hit of Andrew Ladd. I mean, they made a trade. They had to trade 3 picks. The Islanders had to trade 3 picks of their own, and then Andrew Ladd. And the Coyotes gave up absolutely nothing because the Islanders needed cap space. And that Andrew Ladd contract is not cheap. It's 4.375 million every year for the next 2 seasons, this season and the next one. And he's 35 and hasn't really played the NHL that much. Now I will tell you, my two picks were Tyler Pitlick as well as Michael Bunting. Now, Michael Bunting burst onto the scene last year. I think Michael Bunting was 25. He's an unrestricted free agent, though, this offseason. And I think that's why they went with the move that they did. I was also thinking about Christian Fischer, but I thought he's just kind of been underwhelming. And I felt like a veteran presence might be better. And I thought about going with Bunting, but at 25, with only 1 year in the league and only a few games played against, limited teams this past year, and being an unrestricted free agent, you don't know what you're going to have to pay him. So I went ahead and went with Tyler Pitlick. He's 29 and he's got the same kind of team control for next year. I mean, he'll be easy to flip if they want to just move somebody. I was thinking maybe they might go with defenseman Ilya Lyubushkin, who's 27. He's an unrestricted free agent after next season. But Tyler Pitlick is my pick, and that is exactly who Arizona picked. So they have the same mind as me. Obviously, I should be a GM clearly as I create this own team on cap friendly, but they did go ahead and go with Tyler Pitlick. Good forward, 29 years old. He can play the wing either side, and I think he'll be a good veteran presence. But I think as we get in later into this list, I think you'll see the fact that this Seattle team is going to be lacking a bit of offense because their defense, when we get into it's going to be pretty solid. I believe you and I are going to have some of the picks for defensemen, but boy, oh boy, there was no offensive, right? In Vegas, we take a look at Jonathan Marchessault, so he was just sitting there, and then they gave them Riley Smith as well, and William Karlsson developed into an offensive player, and they're still on Vegas as their second line today, and they've been great. So, and like I said before, Arizona did go ahead and pick Tyler Pitlick. He's an unrestricted free agent after next season. So he's got this season, then in free agent. So if they are not doing well or they want to get some assets and trades, he might be one of the guys tonight that is picked and then immediately flipped to another team. I could definitely see him going to somewhere and getting them like a second round pick tonight, literally not even playing a game on the team. He could be picked and flipped right away. So I'm really excited just to see which guys get picked and flipped. I think it's a little tough because all these insiders are ruining the fun in this. Shout out to Frank Cervalli and Bleacher Report. They kind of ruined this whole thing for us, but we digress. Not that matters. And we move on here to the Boston Bruins. Now, it does sound like there's some movement on the Taylor Hall front. But that doesn't matter here because I will say this. I don't know if it was an easy pick or a different pick, but I went with defenseman, their second defenseman, 24-year-old Jeremy Lauzon, a lot like Hayden Fleury. He's got restricted free agent rights after this season. So, and he's only 24 years old, only $850K. So if, he's a good young defenseman, hopefully he can develop into something more. If not, it's worth a shot. But Boston, I really, they're an aging team. I would have liked Mike Riley, who had a very good season for Ottawa and then eventually Boston this past year. He's 28, but he's an unrestricted free agent this offseason, so they would need to pick him and then sign him before he hits the open market on next Wednesday, the 28th. But so I went with Jeremy Lauzon. Who did you go with, James?
I actually stuck with the defenseman route as well as you, but instead I went with Connor Clifton. Connor Clifton was an interesting pick for me. He's a younger defenseman. He's making $1 million. He's going to be a UFA at the 2023 season, so he's got a decent amount of term left. Yeah, exactly. He's got 2 years left, a decent amount of term. He's a young guy who hasn't really been given a chance on that Boston Bruins defensive core. I mean, you have so many people in front of him, and I think that's going to be a theme for a decent amount of my picks too, is guys that have not necessarily been underachieving, but guys who haven't really had the chance on the teams that they are on now. And I mean, like we talked about just a few minutes ago with Vegas when they made all those picks with, Jonathan Marchessault, you had Riley Smith and William Karlsson. Those are guys who were buried deep down in like the lineups of their former teams. Flip over to Vegas, then you're in the spotlight now. And I think Connor Clifton is someone who like may benefit from, being in the spotlight, being given a bigger role than he was in Boston. I mean, he's a young guy. You can't have too many defensemen. And even if Connor Clifton doesn't play a game for Seattle, if he's one of these players that does get flipped, that's good too, because you're acquiring picks or potential players that you wanted that weren't available during the expansion draft. But I mean, he's got team control. He's young. He's making $1 million, so that's a pretty cheap cap hit as well. My runner-up for this pick though was Sean Corrali. I thought he can mix it up. He's a grinder. He can
definitely. That's
physical.
A good pick. I didn't even think about him.
Yeah, I saw him. I was like a little surprised that, I mean, not surprised he was left unprotected because obviously Boston has a lot of good players that they need to protect. But I think Sean Corrali could have been a pretty decent pick. I mean, he's like a nice, solid bottom six guy, a guy that I think most teams in the league would love to have on their
Reminds
roster.
me a lot of that Barclay Goodrow with a little bit less offense, but he just works hard. He's a little
Yeah,
more physical than Goodrow and not as good of a skier. But I think, and here's
exactly.
why the difference between there. I didn't even think about him. I was thinking maybe they go Nick Ritchie, who had a decent season for them. But I think one of the reasons why they might have shied away from this, or at least me, is because he's an unrestricted free agent this year. And as a 28-year-old
Yes.
with a solid role in Boston, going to a new team like that, I don't know if he would want to re-sign in Seattle, given his role with Boston, and he knows he has that role. They know he knows his value there. And for a guy like that, when you have value in that position, I feel like when you don't really want to change that.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely another factor that we do have to think into this is like some of these players are unrestricted right now. And, there's been a few names have been thrown out there today that have already discussed and are committed to sign with Seattle, and they will get picked by Seattle tonight. And we'll discuss that a little later on in the list here. But
Of course.
that's something that we have to remember is that some of these players, might not want to play for Seattle. Like some of these players, like we said with Sean Corrali, I mean, he's carved out a pretty decent role out in Boston right now. If I'm Sean Corrali, I don't think I'd want to leave Boston either. I think I'd rather sign in Boston, stay in my nice little bottom six role, muck it up in the corners, be a very hard nosed player, and that's what he's going to get paid for by Boston. Hopefully, for the Boston Bruins, I think they'd love to keep him.
Of course.
I think
he's their identity. I mean, if there's everybody player that screams Boston as a Ranger fan, and I know as you as a Devil fan, we play Boston all the time. You see him, and I'm like, why is this guy always just a thorn in the side? And given the hype of the third line with Goodrow, Gord, and Coleman of the Lightning in this playoffs in the finals, it's like, why wouldn't you want a guy like that who can muck it up in the corners and just work and then kill penalties? So
yeah, he's a great player.
He's a good player. But we'll see where they go. And then James, by the way, if there's any pick you don't want me to spoil for you that I know, let me know. I won't do it. But
we're going through the list. Might as well.
All right. Well, I was right again. It was Jeremy Lozon. I hate to say it, but again, why aren't I a GM? You know what? You could be my assistant GM. How about that? We move on to the lowly Buffalo Sabres. And now I will say this: Matt Irwin, former Shark, former Predator. He's from the area. He came and he skated in a place called Dublin, Iceland one time. And I was in New York, and a bunch of my friends got to pick up hockey with him about 2 or 3 years ago. And I'm bummed because I would have loved to skate with an NHL player. No, I've done like some camps here helping old coaches out, and they've got like players out there, but like, that would have been so fun to like play on a game with him. Unfortunately, I did not pick him because he's not very good at hockey. Now, do I think they're going to take the $9 million man that's not a free agent until after 2027, who scored 3 goals last year, named Jeff Skinner, who waived his no move clause? Do I think they're going to pick up any of the bad contracts they have? No.
No shot.
Although this pick was given, I'm a little surprised they didn't go with this way. This is the first one I've got wrong. I selected 27-year-old defenseman who's coming off an ACL injury, but was turned into one of the better shut-down defensemen in the league. He's only 27. He's an unrestricted free agent. He's going to be cheap as of injury, and that's Jake McCabe. Jake McCabe kind of turned into a very solid defenseman. I thought he was going to be the pick. Coming off the injury, he's not going to make. He was making 2.85 last year. I think he's only going to make $2 million, so a little cheaper because they do have 3 sign him. He's an unrestricted free agent, but he kind of turned into that very good shutdown defenseman. And I want to know, of this list that is just horrible from Buffalo, it's not good at all. Who did you pick?
Yeah, I mean, there's no shot that I was taking that $9 million man and Jeff Skinner off of Buffalo's hands. I mean, they signed that contract. They have to deal with it. That's not on Seattle. Like, the only way I'm Seattle, I'm taking Jeff Skinner is if Buffalo sends me like a first round pick plus. I think there's no shot I'm taking him off.
And Buffalo wants 2 of those for Jack Eichel.
Exactly. Yeah. So with that being said, my pick, and he's probably screaming out in the streets saying, "Thank God I'm getting out of Buffalo." I picked another defenseman, different one from you. I picked Colin Miller. He's got $3.875 million, a UFA after next season. And he's someone who, like, Buffalo's obviously, they're a dumpster fire. They're not a very good team. But he's someone that, wasn't that bad necessarily. I'm sure like anyone that you pick from Buffalo, I think except for maybe Jeff Skinner, who knows. But anyone who gets out of Buffalo could probably turn into a pretty decent player. Someone who I thought about and, this kind of reflects the majority of my list. If they didn't want to go heavy on the D-man, I also thought about potentially taking Cody Eakin. He's got 2.25 million. He's a UFA at the end of the 2022 season. He's someone that, could be a decent middle six forward. He's shown in past, like, he's been a pretty decent player. He's a role player, and he's gone through a few teams in the past few years.
And he's gone through Henrik Lundqvist as well when he was on Dallas. I don't know if you remember that. He full on blew him up. So I don't like him. But you know what's funny enough, quickly here, Cody Eakin and Colin Miller both were picks by Vegas.
They were, yeah. So it's funny that they're both on Buffalo now, and potentially one of them could get picked by the newest expansion team. But I think, if those were the two picks, you couldn't go wrong. You could convince me either way, depending on how the roster shakes up with the rest of the picks. But I gave my edge to Colin Miller because you can never have too many quality defensemen.
Unfortunately, we were both wrong, and they went with a guy I had literally never heard of, and William Borgen. He's a 24-year-old defenseman who played in the minors last year. He's a restricted free agent. I feel like he might be a piece that's moved. I don't know. Maybe they just kind of hold him, develop him. But we got to move on here, speed things up a little bit here. And I think for me with Calgary, this was the easiest pick for me. I mean, it's Mark Giordano. He's their captain. Yep. He's 37. We've already seen reports that Ron Francis, the GM of the Kraken, said we're going to pick him and make him our captain right away. I mean, he's going to be a free agent after this upcoming season. So if he really wants to go back to Calgary, finish there, he can go there next offseason. He's going to be a good piece for them to move at the trade deadline if they're not in playoff contention. And even then, he still might get moved even if they're in playoff contention. I'm almost certain you had the same pick.
Yeah. Oh, no, there's no question you're picking Mark Giordano. I mean, he's been a quality, I'd say even more than quality. What, didn't he win a Norris a few years ago? Or at least
yes, he did. Running? I believe 2 years ago he won Norris. It was the year after Burns won it. He was tremendous. He was really good. Offensive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's a little up there in age now. He's 37. I forget when he's turning 38, but it's going to be within a season now. He's a leader. He's a captain. I believe he's the only captain who was left exposed into this expansion draft. But he's someone that he's and Ovechkin too. He's a UFA as well.
They left him unprotected.
I want to say they might have. I'd have to double check on that. Mark Giordano is the obvious pick here. I mean, he's a little pricey. He's got 6.75 on the books until the 2022 season. But other than that, when I was looking at my backup picks doing this,
there is
Josh. Yeah, I went with Josh Levo just because he's kind of young as a forward, and there's no other pick besides Mark Giordano.
I didn't even on this one. I didn't even have a backup pick. So
yeah, exactly.
I think we're gonna move quicker. We're right. We can speed things up. We got 30 teams to go to. By the way, Vegas is not available. Now, Carolina, who's a solid team. I had two picks on this one, and they're both forwards. I was thinking Brock McGinn at first, but I shied away from that. I was thinking either Morgan Geekie or Steven Lorentz. I went with Geekie. He's 2 years younger than Lorentz. He's 23. They both play center, and Geekie's been told by Carolina, have you ever seen them? Oh, he's got offense. He just needs a chance. He's a restricted free agent after this upcoming season, and he hasn't really had much experience, so he's going to be extremely cheap. Steven Lorentz, I watched in the playoffs. He works hard. He's speed. He's got size. But Carolina, I mean, it's going to be tough. I think they've got bigger issues on their hand with trying to re-sign Dougie Hamilton and trying to move Jake Gardner. Jake Gardner, who's a free agent until after 2023, and he's got a big cap hit of 4.05. The only other person I was thinking about was maybe Jake Bean, but I don't know. I feel like he hasn't proven himself. I think the upside kind of weighs itself with Geekie or Lorentz, and I went with Geekie.
Yeah, I went with Jake Bean because I think I think he might be a surefire pick if I'm Seattle. If I see this guy, he's being held down in the depth of Carolina. Obviously, we all know Carolina has a wealth of defensemen, really quality defensemen. And Jake Bean, he was a top 15 pick back in 2016. I think he's got a lot of potential. And he's someone that could be jumping straight into the top 4 spot in Seattle. And
he was doing that already in Carolina.
He is, but I just think he could be given more of a chance in Seattle. I mean,
more importance.
Exactly. He's being sheltered because you have guys like Slavin and Pesci and Hamilton as well. And Brady Shea and Jake Gardner when he does play for them. It's just there's too many cooks in the kitchen for the Carolina defensive corps. So I think Jake Bean could be someone who could thrive being given more opportunities to play for a new team.
Now, unfortunately, I'm correct again. Now, I had Jake Bean at first, and then I was like, nah, there's a lot of good other defensemen out there that are pretty solid. And I think what's going to be the difference here is team control. Geeky has control till after the season. Jake Bean, although under restricted free agent, is not under control. You know, they got to re-sign him and hope he re-signs. And I feel like given how everything's going with Carolina and their offseason with Dougie Hamilton possibly leaving, maybe Seattle goes after him. So they wouldn't want to take Jake Bean and then kind of shelter him if they were able to sign Dougie Hamilton, who's an unrestricted free agent. And the fact that they want to move Jake Gardner means he's going to get a bigger role this season, no matter what. I think he's going to either be with Shea or Slavin, especially if Dougie Hamilton is out of he's not on the team anymore. So I feel like Geeky, they need some forward depth, and they might, it's a low risk, high reward, because all we've heard from him is he's got this scoring touch that just hasn't shown up in the NHL. So that's why I went with Geekies, because I feel like this team is missing offense, and I feel like there's other defensemen out there that are very good. So we move on, and now we're on to Chicago. Now, this is one of the few teams that we don't know who's getting picked. And I think I don't want to say it's an easy pick, but I went with the defenseman Calvin DeHaan. He's 30, and actually is a lot like the Mark Giordano pick, except he's a little younger, making less money. He's a free agent at the end of this upcoming season. He is a very good defenseman. He was an Islander pick originally, and then he moved to I believe he went to Chicago right away, and he's just kind of turned himself into a very solid defenseman, that 3-4 kind of guy who can shut him down, and he brings a veteran presence. I thought about Shadorov, but I don't know. I feel like DeHaan's the kind of guy that you might be able to move and get assets at the deadline.
So, I actually didn't have DeHaan as my pick. I switched it up because I was looking at my list and I saw I was picking a ton of defensemen, so I figured I'd switch it up, pick a forward, and I went with Brett Connolly. He's making $3.5 million. He's got a few years left on his contract. He's a UFA at the end of the 23 season. He's someone who just got to Chicago, just spent this past year. He only played 10 games this season, 2 points, 1 goal, 1 assist. A former high pick. He's someone that's kind of been a journeyman at this point. He played for Florida previously, and he played for Washington a little bit, Boston, and Tampa Bay as well. So he's kind of got a rap sheet a bit. He had a pretty decent season with the Capitals a few years ago, back in 2018-19. He had 22 goals, 24
Florida
assists.
After that either.
Yeah, I mean, Florida, he had 33 points in 69 games. Pretty nice. But I think, he's someone that could be a solid forward, a good veteran presence. He's been around the league for a while. He's been on a few teams, a few locker rooms, and I think he could have been a decent pick. My backup, though, was Colin Delia, because he's a young goalie that a lot of Chicago fans were hyping up early on the season when he first came onto the scene. He's making $1 million until 2022. He could have been like a depth goalie option as maybe your minor league starter. I don't think if Colin Delia was the pick that he'd be on the Seattle bench in the major leagues anytime soon. But yeah, I went with Brett Connolly.
So we'll have to see. And I think that's, again, they've got a pretty small exposure list, especially on Cap Friendly. Now, this doesn't have everything. A couple of the guys who are in the minors aren't going to be on here. Now, again, that's one of the teams we don't know who the pick is. So that's going to be, where I'm looking forward to getting through to Chicago.
Yeah.
We move on here to Colorado. and one of the more bigger storylines here is their captain. Gabriel Landeskog is a free agent right now, and he's left unprotected. There's no reason to protect him. If he doesn't want to sign with Seattle, he doesn't have to. Now, I did not pick him. I went with former San Jose Shark Jonas Donskoy. He's making $3.9 million. He's been a solid middle six. He can play in that second line winger role. He can score you some points. He's decent on the power play. Good skater, uses an extremely long stick, and he's not a free agent until after 2023. I think he brings a good veteran presence. He's 29. He's been around. He's been deep in the playoffs. He scored that overtime winner for the Sharks in Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Finals in 2016 to give them the first ever Stanley Cup win. The finish call was great. So I thought about going Eric Johnson, but I don't know, given his injury issues, everything going on. And I thought about maybe going Patrick Nemeth, but I don't know. This was a tough pick for me, and I went with Donskoy. I feel like, he can bring a little bit of that scoring to them.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I went with Donskoy as well. I think he's a quality forward. I mean, you've seen what he's been able to do back in San Jose, and you've seen what he's been able to do with Colorado now. It was a little bit up in the air for me. I did also have JT Compher on my list as well.
That was my backup
pretty
pick as well.
Yeah, he's a pretty similar to Jonas Donskoy. He's making $3.5 million, so he's about $400,000 less than Donskoy. He's going to be a UFA at the end of the 2023 season, just like Jonas Donskoy. So honestly, those two picks, those two players were kind of a toss-up for me, but I gave the edge to Donskoy.
I feel like Donskoy was more of that kind of, you know what you're going to get kind of guy. Conference been a little inconsistent,
Yeah.
wanting more out of. So I figure you go with the safer pick there. And I will
Mhm.
say this, we're both correct because Colorado
There we go.
is taking Jonas Donskoy. There you go. We move forward here to Columbus. Now, this one's out. This is a little bit of a surprise. I thought this was almost an easy pick for them. I went with Max Domi. He's a year unrestricted free agent after this upcoming year. He's making 5.3. He hasn't been the greatest. You know, his offense dipped in Montreal towards the end, and then they moved him to Columbus. And it wasn't good there, but when has Columbus had a good offense? I mean, they can't even get Patrick Laine to have a good offense there.
Yeah.
I went with Domi. Who did you pick?
I thought this was a safe pick as well. I went with Max Domi, which is a little surprising. So the report did come out that they did not pick Max Domi.
They picked defenseman Gavin Bayreuther. He's 27-year-old. And if this doesn't scream, let him walk. He's an unrestricted free agent. He is 27, a left-handed defenseman. And with the decor that we've already mentioned, you know, with Giordano and Lausanne and Fleury, if he's not flipped or not on the team, I'm genuinely not surprised.
This has side deal written all over because I'm a huge hockey guy. I have never heard that name before in my entire life.
Never. Not once.
Yeah, like this has to be a side deal. I mean, I would have even taken Mikhail Grigorenko over this guy. He was my backup pick because I mean that's a name that I recognize. I mean, there wasn't too much on Columbus's exposed list, but if there's not a side deal and that was Seattle's actual pick with no limitations, I'm shocked.
I'm genuinely shocked. But we move forward here. We're ripping through them now. We got 30 minutes left of the show. We're up to Dallas, and I think this one was a little bit of a thought process. You think maybe Ben Bishop, but I think the injuries are an issue with him. And I went with the big rig, 28-year-old unrestricted free agent, but I think they're going to re-sign him. I think it'd be a great place for him. Jamie Oleksiak, dude, he's huge, and I mean huge. I think he's a solid pick. He's turned into a very solid defenseman. He is an unrestricted free agent, only 28 years old, but he's 6'7", 255, hence the nickname the big rig. And I think this is a pretty safe pick. I think we can kind of see a theme of what Seattle wanted to do if they were to pick him, which they did. Sorry to spoil it here for James because I don't know what he picked, but I feel like, you know, maybe Sammy Vatanen is a Devils fan. You're like, maybe, but he's been injury issued. His offense hasn't been the same. I feel like Jamie Oleksiak's a solid defense pairing. He could play with Giordano. And who did you have?
Yeah, I went with Jamie Oleksiak as well. He was my pick. I did see that he was, you know, projected to sign with Seattle, and he would be a confirmed pick. That was one of the first things that I really saw this morning concerning Seattle. I mean, he's a huge defenseman. You those don't grow on trees. I mean, you see guys like, I mean, well, with Tampa Bay just winning the cup, Victor Hedman. I mean, Jamie Oleksiak is
bigger than
no
Hedman.
Chance of Victor Hedman. Exactly, but he's a huge defenseman. That's something that a nice presence on the blue line. That's something like teams clamor for, and now Seattle has that. I also considered Blake Como. He's a little up there in age. He's a veteran presence. He's making $2.4 million until the 2022 offseason. I mean, you know, it was a shakeup. I definitely give the edge to Jamie Oleksiak, maybe like 9 times out of 10. But Blake Como's no slouch either. He brings a nice veteran presence, but I mean, 6'7" defensemen, they don't grow on trees. You got to pick that.
And he can move. He's a good defenseman. But we move forward to one of the other teams we genuinely don't know who's going to get picked. And that's the Detroit Red Wings. Now they're in a rebuild, and they've got the man who basically set up the Lightning to win like they have. And Steve Eisman running the show. He went back home. I went with former Vancouver Canuck Troy Stecher. He's a UFA after this year. He's 27 years old, 1.7 mil cap hit, so he's cheap. He can fit into your top 4 D-man. I think he can be anywhere you can play. He's not a number 1 D-man, but he's a good depth defenseman. He can move, he can skate. And I don't know if you saw the move he made for Team Canada in overtime to pass to, I forget who it was, Onomon Japani in the World Championships when he backhand toe drag to the leg or pass across overtime win in the semifinals. But I don't know. I mean, the other people you could look at, you look at Tyro Hirose. He's a young player, 25 years old, but he's the unrestricted free agent. The only other one I was thinking of is Evgeny Svechnikov, who, you know, he's got the RFA rights this year, but he's the brother of Carolina's Andrei Svechnikov. But I don't know. I feel like every more I looked at, it's like I really just can't pick anybody else here other than Troy Stecher.
Yeah, Troy Stecher, he was my backup, but I think I might have like switched him over to my actual pick, what I would want. Detroit, there weren't too many options. Like I wasn't going to take Franz Nielsen off their cap hit. I wasn't going to take Danny DeKaiser, who's making $5 million. My original pick, and I'm still not sure if I'm gonna go with him or Troy Stetcher, but I went with Vlad Nemestikov because he's making 2 million till the 2022 season. He's kind of been up and down. Obviously, he started out with Tampa, I believe, was pretty decent. Then he went over in that JT Miller trade over to the Rangers.
Don't remind me.
So,
As a Ranger
so
fan, don't remind me.
yeah, and he didn't do too well over there, and now he's in Detroit. Yeah, looking at it, maybe he's like a reclamation project. I mean, Detroit's not exactly the best team in the league. Maybe he moves to Seattle, has a bigger role, but I think I'm switching my pick and I'm going with Troy Stetcher just because he's a solid D man and he's pretty cheap and he's got some team control.
And I think he'll be valuable at the deadline if they do want to move him. The next pick
Oh yeah,
is another defenseman here from Edmonton, and this is also a confirmed pick. And I think this is also, we thought maybe, somebody like James Neal or somebody along those lines. My first pick was originally Dominic Cahoon, but I went with Adam Larson. He's just turned into a solid defenseman, and the haul for Larson 1-for-1 trade still lives on. But I don't know. I'm more looking. I'm like, I can't really pick anybody else other than Adam Larson. And there were reports that is the pick, and he will already resign. And I want to know, did you have a different pick than me in Adam Larson?
no. Even before I saw the Adam Larson confirmed to sign, which is 4 years by 4 million, which is a pretty decent contract for him. I'm surprised
Perfect.
Edmonton couldn't give that for him.
Well, yeah.
But
And
no,
then,
yeah, I mean, yeah.
go ahead.
I thought that Adam Larson is the pick anyway. I mean, I knew him as his days as a Devil when the season before he got traded. At the end of that, I thought he was like on the rise for like something nice. Obviously, we got Taylor Hall out of him, so I wasn't complaining about that. But Adam Larson's a great defensive defenseman. You can't really go wrong with this pick. I can see him on the top pair for Seattle. Pair him with maybe someone like Mark Giordano, someone who has like the more offensive. So Adam Larson's the guy who goes in the corners, picks up the pucks, and makes that first pass to someone who can get the offense started. Someone who I considered was Kyle Turris.
He's been so underwhelming. I don't think they were ever going to think about that.
He ever since he got traded over to Nashville and then got bought out by them, he's making 1.65 million till the 2022 season. He's someone, if they picked him, if Adam Larson wasn't available, he's someone that could be like a fourth line center for them. He hasn't been the best since he left Ottawa, which has been so long. I kind of forgot that he played for Ottawa, but yeah, Adam Larson's the obvious pick here.
Yeah, definitely. And we move forward here. We got to speed things up a little bit. Here we're going slow. Yep. We love our analysis, and this is why I went to the show. But here's the most obvious pick. We heard about it beforehand. Chris Driedger from the Florida Panthers, the goalie. And I think this is Florida's easy way out to not have to pay him. They've got Bobrovsky, they have to keep, has been unwilling, but they got the 19-year-old Spencer Knight goaltender. I would have loved Frank Vatrano, but you need a goalie, and it's Chris Driedger.
No, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Chris Driedger is the obvious choice, but Frankie Vatrano, if Chris Driedger was not available, would have been a very nice selection for Seattle to take from Florida.
We move on here to the LA Kings now. I don't think they're going to go after Jonathan Quick. I think there's better goalies on the table, like Chris Driedger and among others. Now, I would have loved as a Ranger fan to see Brendan Lemieux go to Seattle, but I keep hearing about this guy, and I've got some friends who are Kings fans, and that's Carl Gunstrom, left winger, 23 years old, restricted free agent after this upcoming season. They've got Arthur Kaliev, they got Quentin Byfield, the two high picks coming up. They got Trevor Zegras, not Zegras, Turcotte. Zegras is on Anaheim, my apologies. And I feel like their defensemen just aren't the greatest. I mean, you could maybe make an effort for Curtis McDermott, but I'm going to go Carl Grundstrom.
Yeah, Brendan Lemieux was my second choice. I think obviously his father was a former Devil. He's a Ranger, so like I've seen plenty of Brendan Lemieux. He could have been a great pick. I went with Andreas Athanasiou. He's an RFA, someone who's been a little underwhelming. He did have a few good starts in Detroit and then got moved over to the Oilers, and now he's with the Kings. So he's bounced around the league. He's a very fast player. He was my pick. He's someone that I could see potentially thriving in an offensive system with Seattle.
Especially, and he'd be the guy, and lacking offense. Unfortunately, you and I both wanted them to take him forward, and they're going to take the defenseman Curtis McDermott, 27 years old, unrestricted free agent after next year. If he has a good season, he's good to flip. We move forward here to Minnesota. Now, this is an interesting one. I think this is a little tough. I'm a little surprised that they left Capo Kakinen, their goaltender, who's young. He's 24 years old, had a great season this year, unprotected. Now, originally I had him picked, but I felt that there's other goalies out there that are less of a take a chance because Kakinen only had that 1 year of experience. I went with Carson Soucy, defenseman, 26 years old, only making 2.7 mil UFA after 2 years. I think that's a pretty good pick. Everybody else on that roster kind of just is too much of a risk for me. But I think either Ian Cole or Carson Soucy are my guys. And then if they really want to go off the wall, they'll go Capo Kakinen. But I went with Carson Soucy.
Yeah, Capo Kakinen was my pick. He is a little unproven, but I'm looking at that cap hit. He's making $725,000 for 2022 season. He's an RFA at the end of that, so he does have team control. Especially if you pick Chris Drieger, he's your starter, he's your confirmed starter. You can let Kapanen either sit in the minors and tool up his game, or maybe be a 1A, 1B.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I also considered maybe Nick Bukestad just because he does have the size. He's been pretty underwhelming ever since he's been even in Florida towards the end. He's a little underwhelming. He got shipped over to Pittsburgh and now he's over in Minnesota now. But Carson Soucy was, he's 2.05 million until the 2022 season. Not the production you want from Nick Bukestad, but I think Carson Soucy is also someone who I considered as well.
And we look, and here comes one of the more headline ones. Carey Price is for Montreal. Just brought his team to the Stanley Cup Finals. He went to the front office in Montreal and said, "I'm going to waive my no move clause for the expansion draft because I want you guys to keep Jake Gallen and Shea Weber, whose career might be over, who's also an unrestricted free agent after 2026." Unfortunately, I did not bite. I did not think Price was going to get picked. He's due an $11 million signing bonus on day one of his contract once they pick him. I went with 22-year-old restricted free agent Cale Fleury, and we're going to put Cale Fleury and Hayden Fleury together, and I'm really hoping they're a D pair because I believe, are they related? Do we know if they're related?
I cannot confirm if they're related or not, but
that would be awesome. You got Hayden Fleury to Cale Fleury up the wing. It'd be great. So I went with Cale Fleury.
Scoring on Marc-Andre Fleury.
Exactly. Who do you got from Montreal?
I went with Jonathan Drouin. He's an interesting pick. He wasn't in this playoffs. So he had to step away due to personal reasons, took a leave of absence. He's making $5.5 million until the 2023 season. He's someone that I could see potentially, Montreal's not exactly known for their offense, and he, wasn't the best. It didn't end well in Tampa for him, but I could see him being not so much a reclamation project, but just someone with a fresh start on a new team. Could do very well. I did not bite on Carey Price either. I don't want any part of that contract. But someone who I did consider was Paul Byron. He makes 3.4 until 2023. He would have been a decent pick as well. I think, a solid middle six forward who can be on special teams, do a little bit of penalty kill, a little bit of power play. But Jonathan Drouin was my pick.
Yeah, I thought about him, and unfortunately, I feel like with him, taking leave of absence, taking that money, and he just hasn't been the greatest offensively. I think they just went with the young prospect and Cale Fleury, and that is the way they went. They didn't bite on Carey Price either, and I think Montreal is getting exactly what they want. Move on to Nashville here, and another interesting one. Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson both being unprotected, making $8 million, and they're just so underwhelming. And a bit of a surprise, I went with Calle Yarncrook. I thought he's been a solid two-way player. He can score some goals for you, a great penalty killer. I thought about Rocco Grimaldi, and if I wasn't going to go Calle Yarncrook, I was going to go Ryan Johansson just because he's 28. But Yarncrook, the more I looked, I was like, Calle Yarncrook's a good player. So I went Calle Yarncrook, and that is actually who they did pick, which is honestly a little surprising. And I'm surprised I got that correct.
Yeah, I definitely considered Calle Yarncrook. He's, been a pretty decent player. He's got, a decent bit of production. He's making $2 million until the 2022 season. So not the biggest cap hit. My pick, though, for them was Colton Sissons. He makes $2.857 million. And the big part about this is that he's signed until 2026. That's the longest term out of anyone that I think has been exposed.
Other than the obvious guys.
Yeah. Other than the guys who who are left
unprotected,
like a Carey Price, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, he's someone that obviously he got that contract for a reason. Nashville loves him as a decent role playing bottom six forward who can fill in on a second line here and then. But yeah, you couldn't really have gone wrong with either Colton Sissons or Calle Yarncrook, who ended up being the pick. So I think a good move on Seattle for not biting on Matt Duchene or Ryan Johansson.
Yeah, definitely. All right, on to the Devils, and I have two things for you on the Devils before I get to your pick. I went with Nathan Bastian, but my two things are this. Matt Tennyson went to my rival high school out here in Pleasanton, California, and I'm friends with Aaron Dell.
Really?
Yes. So Aaron Dell and
wow.
Our friends. I have him on Instagram. I chat with him all the time. I'm going to try and get him on the show at one point. He's busy. Obviously, he's a free agent. But there was one time the Sharks held a gaming like, oh, win a game of NHL with a player, and it was Dell, and I got
There
the
you
thing,
go.
so I got to play a game with him on stream. We've stayed in contact. I played video games with him. I chat with him. My friends, I work with one of his friends out here in California, so I'll text him, and he's getting, he just got married. He's gonna have a kid, so congrats, Aaron Dell. But he doesn't get picked here. I went with Nathan Bastian. I like him. He's signed through 2023 as a restricted free agent. 23-year-old. Maybe he can get some offense. He's a big body. This is your team. Let me hear it.
Yeah. I'm very disappointed because I think the pick did get leaked out that it is Nathan Bastian.
Oh, it is. I didn't see that picked.
No, yeah, I think that got leaked out by Chris Johnson, I believe, tweeted out a little while ago. Very disappointing for me. I love Nathan Bastian. He's a great player, nice like power forward in the league. He's best friends with Mikey McLeod as well. They played on the same OHL team for Mississauga. They got drafted first round, second round by the Devils back in 2016. I hate to see Nathan Bastian leave. Love the kid. As a Devils fan, though, there's some players that I kind of wanted Seattle to take off our hands. My pick was Will Butcher. I love Will Butcher, but he just did not fit in Lindy Ruff's system this season.
That was my backup
barely,
pick.
Yeah, he barely got any playing time. His first season, his rookie season, was fantastic for the Devils. I believe he had like 44 points as a defenseman, which is great to see. He was great on the power play. His production has gone down the past few years, whether that's, the Devils forcing him into a role that he's not ready for yet. But then again, he's up there in age. He was a college free agent when he signed with the Devils a few years ago. He's making $3.7 million until the 2022 season. He's someone that I could see like, hey, get a fresh start. Lindy Ruff's system isn't working out for you in the Devils. Another guy, Andreas Janssen didn't have the best production for the Devils this season. He was left unprotected. I was thankful he was, because he was someone that I wanted the Devils to trade for, prior to them acquiring him. I thought he was a potential player. He was down the depth chart in Toronto. Could have been a solid guy. But my other pick was Nick Merkley as well. Nick Merkley is he's a hound dog. He's a bloodhound. He'll get in the corner. He's a hard-nosed player, but Will Butcher was my pick. But unfortunately, Nathan Bastian will be picked.
He's that kind of guy who could really bite the Devils in the butt if I'm thinking about it.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna miss Nathan Bastian so much.
So we move on here to the team that I think you and I both hate the most, and that is the New York Islanders. And I just want to say they protected Cal Clutterbuck over Josh Bailey or Jordan Eberle. I don't mind them keeping Matt Martin. He's an identity, because you also got to re-sign Casey Cizikas, that great fourth line. But pick was leaked out. They're taking Jordan Eberle. He's going to be their top line right wing. How could you not pick him? Josh Bailey is making $5 million. They're both signed through 2024. I think Eberle's just got more upside on the offense and he's a pure goal scorer. He can score goals. He's not going to score many. He's going to score 25, 30, which is all you need for an expansion team. It's pretty obvious for me. I think my backup was Kiefer Bellows, but I feel like with Eberle, you know what you're going to get, and they need some sort of offense, like less chance taking.
Yeah, it was a toss-up between Josh Bailey and Jordan Eberle. I mean, those are two players that you don't really see being exposed too often, especially for who was on the New York Islanders protection list. I give the edge to Josh Bailey, though, just because, I believe Josh Bailey's a center. I could be wrong on that, but if he is a center, he's playing a premium position over there. But yeah, you couldn't have gone wrong with either of those two players.
All right, and then we move on to my team, and I wish they would have taken it. Anthony D'Angelo, but whatever. All I have to say is this: thank you, Colin Blackwell. Capo Caco is going to take your spot. Have fun in Seattle. You were good for us. I really thank you. I'm a little surprised they didn't protect you, and they protected Kevin Rooney, former Devil. But I'm happy that Barclay Goodger on, but that 6-year deal's staring me in the face, and I'm happy they get to see Julien Gauthier. I like his size, his speed, and I think the Gerard Gallant offense is going to be great. But Colin Blackwell, thank you. You were great. A surprise, but Caco is going to take your spot.
Yeah. Colin Blackwell is the pick for me as well. And my younger brother's a Ranger fan too, and he actually wanted Colin Blackwell to be picked because he think he might have, took a little too much for his next contract. He might have been a little overhyped, and he's a fan of Julien Gauthier as well. So Colin Blackwell is my pick.
I like the way your brother thinks. Well, I think he also, he's taking a spot from some of the young guys. Now, Ottawa.
Yeah.
I feel like he needed a depth goalie to stuff with the minors here. I went with Joey Dacko. He went to Arizona State. It's a good story. First Arizona State player in the NCAA, from them to make it to the NHL once they made it to the NCAA. I just don't see anybody. I think maybe Chris Tierney, but I feel like that cap hit's too high. And for like a bottom forward who isn't, like a good Joe or Coleman. So I went with the goalie Joey Dacko. Put him in the minors, let him develop, and call him up if you need to.
Yeah, solid pick there. Part of me maybe thought Matt Murray, but seeing that cap hit, seeing how much
Oh,
term he has left on, and like he wasn't even that good when he was in Pittsburgh when he was winning the cups. I went with Evgeny Dadonov. He had an underwhelming season with Ottawa. Then again, he was playing for Ottawa, so that might have been expected. He was very decent in Florida the past few years. He's making $5 million until the 2023 season. He's someone that I can see put him on a better team, put him with better players. He'll give you better production.
definitely. We move on to the Flyers, and they made a trade for Ryan Ellis, which I think was an awesome trade. He's one of the top
Oh yeah,
defensemen in the NHL. I think they gave up Phil Myers and Nolan Patrick. And Phil Myers is a good defenseman, but you can upgrade that with Ryan Ellis. I'm taking that all day. And Nolan Patrick was underwhelming, but they made this whole big deal that they can now protect James and Reeves, like, and then didn't. He's an unrestricted free agent after 2023. He's making $7 million. He had a kind of a revival of his career. He's 32. Good mid top six forward. He's going to get in front. He's going to score power play goals. I think they really want them to take Gosh this year, but I did go with JVR on this one. My backup was left winger Carson Terensky, though.
Solid. Actually, those are a lot of names that I didn't have. I went with a defenseman, Justin Braun. He's making 1.8 million
Former
until
Shark.
2022 season. Exactly. Yeah, there we go. He's a decent body on the defense there. He's a pretty good pick. Like I said, can't have too many defensemen. He'd be like a nice depth pick for him. I believe he's on the Flyers' third pairing right now.
Yep.
Part of me did consider Jakub Voracek. I know he was left unprotected. He's obviously a big core player. He's making $8.25 million until 2024.
Too much
though.
for me. That's just
It's too much. Yeah, I didn't exactly. I didn't want to commit too much to him. If I'm Seattle, I gotta be thinking about the future. And Jakub Voracek, I don't think he's part of it. I think that price tag is too high.
Yeah, definitely. So we're getting towards the end here. We've only got about 10 minutes left. Pittsburgh. I went Cody Ceci. I don't even know who did they pick from Pittsburgh. They picked is that one out? I don't have that one out. Oh, they did. It looks like they're taking Brandon Tanev, which I think really is gonna hurt Pittsburgh. He's that Blake Coleman, Yanni Gore guy, and people in Pittsburgh loved him. They're like, oh God, 6-year deal at $3.5 million. I mean, Barclay Goodrow got the same deal, and Tanev turned into a great third line player. He's physical, he can hit. I think he's going to bring excitement to games. Fans are going to love him. He's that feel good guy. But I went with Cody Ceci. The pick is Brandon Tanev. Who did you go with?
Brandon Tanev was my pick. I have to admit, yeah, I wasn't the biggest fan of his contract when he first signed it with Pittsburgh. I saw the term. I saw that at 6 years, 3.5. I thought maybe a little too rich for my blood, but he proved me wrong. He's been a solid forward over in Pittsburgh. Part of me considered Casey DeSmith just to have a depth goalie, just because I wasn't sure what the goalie situation. Obviously, we know Chris Drieger was the pick. Casey DeSmith, he was part of a 1A, 1B situation over in Pittsburgh. Sure. Yeah. But Brandon Tanev was my pick, and I think that's a smart move on Seattle for taking him.
And we go to the hometown team for me. We go to the Sharks, and I had 3 players listed that I thought they were going to pick, and I was going to be Ryan Donato was going to be their number 1 choice. And if it wasn't Donato, it was going to be Dylan Gambrell, who's from the area. And if there wasn't the pick, it was going to go with big Alex True, 24 years old. He's a restricted free agent. He's only making a little bit of money. He's touched the NHL a little bit. And it turns out they are going with Alex True. And here's the thing. Everybody doubted me when they're like, why would they go Alex True? He's not that good. He played for the Seattle Thunderbirds in juniors. So people and scouts in the area, which I'm sure got hired by the Kraken, like him, knew him. He's good. He works hard. He's huge. He's 6'5", 200 pounds. So he's still growing. He's from Denmark, and they did go with Alex True. And I'm a little surprised that they didn't go with Donato or Gambrell, but I like this pick. It's a low risk, possible middle six, maybe could be a second line center reward. Who did you have?
Yeah, I went with Radim Sumac. He's a defenseman. He's making $2.25 million until 2024. I thought, why not more defensemen? I don't know if he'd ever play for Seattle. He might be someone that I could see them flipping. Ryan Donato was definitely my second pick, though. I mean, he's a quality forward. He's kind of bounced around the league a little bit ever since he went from Boston over to Minnesota, and now he's with San Jose.
And he's so misused in San Jose.
Yeah, exactly. He's someone, and I've been saying it a few times already, but like fresh start for Ryan Donato would have been great. But obviously you're the San Jose Sharks expert, so I'm going deferring with you on your pick.
Yeah, I think people are just afraid of Shimmick's knee injuries. We go to one of our last controversial players here. We're going to St. Louis. I went Vince Dunn. They've been trying to move him. His value's high. I think Tarasenko wants out, but I don't think they're going to bite on him because I think they weren't going to keep him in the reports that came out. Tarasenko's free agent after another 2 seasons. He's been really good. He's dealt with injuries, and Vince Dunn, I think, is a guy that you can put as your number 2, number 3 defenseman to just kind of build the team around. Hope he develops into more. Who did you take from St. Louis?
I went with Vladdy Tarasenko. I mean, obviously he has the shoulder injuries. That's the whole reason why he's wanting out of St. Louis. He doesn't trust their opinion about how to deal with his shoulder injuries and everything, all the surgeries. If when he's healthy, he's one of the top players in the league. You can put the puck in the net, and that's something that Seattle might not have the option of picking here. But Vince Dunn was heavily my second choice. He's a great defenseman. He's someone that I'm sure every team in the league would love to have. He's just someone who hasn't, been given the chance. He's such down in the depth chart with St. Louis because they have so many quality defensemen there.
Definitely. We move on to the Stanley Cup champs, Tampa Bay Lightning. I think it's pretty obvious here. I had 2 picks, so I went with Yanni Gourde. He's making 5.1. He's 29. He's free agent after 2025. He can play in that middle 6 forward again. He can be that second line center. He can be that third line center when it's good. My backup was Ross Colton, who had a great year. I just think he's unproven. I think it's pretty obvious. Yanni Gourde, Blake Coleman, and Barclay Goodrow, that third line that was so great for Tampa, isn't going to be a part of the team next season. Obviously, with Goodrow going to the Rangers, Coleman, I don't know if they're going to be able to afford. He's a free agent. And now I think Yanni Gourde's going to Seattle.
Yeah, Yanni Gourde, fantastic pick there. Obviously, the clear pick. Ross Colton, shout out to New Jersey native Ross Colton, by the way, game-winning goal for the Stanley Cup final. Alex Killorn was my other thought. He makes $4.5 million until the 2023 season. He's a leader on that Tampa Bay team, and he's brings a lot of great qualities. And I think he could have been a decent pick, but the obvious one is Yanni Gourde. He's part of that great third line for Tampa Bay, 2-time Stanley Cup winner, and I think he can thrive in a higher role with with Seattle.
Yeah, definitely. We move forward here. We've got 4 minutes left, so let's rip through these next 4. We've got Toronto, and it's short-lived, the Jared McCann career. It's already come out that they're picking him. I don't know. I understand why they traded for him and then left him unprotected. He's the kind of guy that I would want on Toronto. Good center, left winger, was great in Pittsburgh, and I think he's a perfect second-line winger or center, whatever you want to play him in Seattle.
Yeah. Jared McCann's a great pick. Toronto, maybe they picked him up just so Seattle wouldn't pick anyone else off their roster. I considered Alex Kerfoot. He's a former Devils draft pick. He was with Colorado. Now he's with Toronto. He's been a solid player for him. Used to be in Harvard too. He played for Harvard. He makes 3.5 till 2023, but I think Jared McCann's a solid pick for.
And if I'm Toronto,
Seattle
though,
there.
I would have wanted them to take Kerfoot over McCann. That's why I'm confused, though. I would have rather McCann than Kerfoot. He's also cheaper. Vancouver, I went with the guy who's supposed to be offensive but hasn't amounted to anything in Matthew Highmore. And their pick was Cole Lind. Never heard of him. He's a winger. Who'd you have for Vancouver quickly here?
Vancouver, I had Braden Holtby. Might as well. He's 4.3 million till 2022. It might as well get a 1A 1B with Chris Drieger. And he had some injuries issues this past season, but I think he would have been a solid pick as a backup goalie for them.
Definitely. And my backup goalie for them this year is coming from Washington, our next team. That's Vitek Vanacek. He was great this year. I think he's perfect. You've got Drieger who can carry it, Vanacek who's coming, and then Dackord right behind them. So you're going to get some development. You're going to get some 1A, 1B. All 3 of these goalies that I have picked in Dackord, Vanacek, and Drieger are going to play. So I'm with Vanacek from Washington. Who'd you go with?
Yeah, I went with Connor Sheary. He's a forward. He's making the reason why I picked him, he's a quality forward. We saw that in Pittsburgh. We're seeing that in Washington. Best part about him, though, is that he's making $735,000 until 2023. That's like a negative cap hit for the production that you're getting out of him. I think he would have been a great pick. Vitek Vanacek was my second pick, though. Again, like you can't go wrong with him. He can be a solid up and coming goalie. We saw that with Washington this past season, but those are 2 solid picks right there.
And last but not least, I think Winnipeg tried to say, look at Dylan DeMello, and they just couldn't protect Mason Appleton. I went with Appleton. I didn't fall for their tricks. Who'd you go with quickly here?
I fell with for it. I did Dylan DeMello. $3 million till 2024. I mean,
now I don't think that would have been a bad pick at all. He's a solid defenseman since he left the Sharks.
Exactly. You go with the big D man, a former Sharks D man. That's a common theme on my list here. My backup choice was Eric Comrie. He's been in and out, been picked up by waivers, been leaving Winnipeg, going back to Winnipeg over the past few seasons. But Dylan DeMello is my pick.
Well, James, we got pushed up against it, but I appreciate you coming on. I'd love to come on your show to talk more hockey. I'm hoping for a lot of side deals tonight, but thanks for checking me out. Just search Not That It Matters on YouTube, Not That It Matters with Max Miller. James, plug your stuff quickly, about 30 seconds here.
Absolutely. My show here on the Bench Sports, the Hockeyholic. We're at 5 o'clock Eastern time, 5 to 5:30 every Tuesday and Thursday. Also follow me on TikTok at Hockey Talk with an underscore at the end of it. I'm really active on there. Really excited. Thank you, Max, for having me on the show. It was a pleasure. Love talking hockey. We got through the hour, a little short at the end of it there, but fantastic show. And I can't wait to see what side deals are, because that's the exciting part going on with the Seattle expansion draft tonight.
Definitely. Thanks for joining, James. This has been Not That It Matters with Max Miller. Keep listening to the bench. We got Ryan Lip next. Have a good day, guys.